Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. What you're about to hear isn't a fairy tale or even a lesson. It's a slow-motion collapse, one she asked for, and one I watched happen without saying a word. It started with a blue post-it on the bathroom mirror. Not a conversation, not a phone call, not even a quiet sigh in bed. Just a note, stuck next to my electric razor. Let's talk tonight. I have an idea that might surprise you, in a good way. Q. Spoiler, it wasn't good. It wasn't surprising. And that little heart at the end? It should have been a warning label. That night, she didn't wait for dinner. She didn't ask how my day was. She just sat across from me with that same nervous excitement people get when they're about to try skydiving. And then she said it, I think we should open the relationship. Just like that. Like she was suggesting we try almond milk instead of regular. No tremble in her voice. No tears. Just an idea. I laughed. A short, breathless kind of laugh that sounds fake even to yourself. But she didn't flinch. She just tilted her head and said, You've always said love isn't about possession. I had said that once, years ago, in a debate about whether cats should wear collars. So there I was, sitting with a forkful of mushroom risotto halfway to my mouth, suddenly faced with the fact that my wife, Quinn, wanted permission to wander. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said the worst thing imaginable. If it makes you happy. Those 6 words would unravel everything. The next morning, she made coffee like normal, kissed my temple like nothing had changed. And by Saturday, she had her first outing. She even called it that, like it was a picnic. He was a yoga instructor named Berkeley. Who names their kid Berkeley? That should have been red flag number 1. Red flag number 2. He texted her in Sanskrit. Red flag number 3. He invited her to something called an intention hike. I was still brushing my teeth when she walked in. Radiant, glowing, wearing a sundress I hadn't seen in 3 years and perfume I thought she hated. She gave me a little wave like I was the receptionist at a dentist office. Don't wait up, she chirped. And I didn't. But not because I didn't care. Because I didn't know how to react. What's the protocol when your wife goes out to connect with someone else? With your approval, I watched Netflix that night, ate leftover tacos, fell asleep on the couch with Copernicus the cat sitting on my chest like a judge. She came home at 2:14 a.m. I only know because I checked the Ring camera on my phone. She was barefoot, carrying her heels, giggling into her phone, and I just watched the footage on loop. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't sleep. The next morning, she brought me a smoothie. Pineapple and mint, my favorite. Thank you for being so supportive, she said. I feel alive again. She felt alive. And I felt like I was dissolving. But that was just the first night. By the second week, she had a connection calendar. By week 3, she started suggesting I should get out there too. And by week 4, well, that's when everything flipped. Because her joy, it didn't survive reality. And neither did Berkeley. I used to think a calendar was just a tool to stay organized. Dentist appointments, birthdays, maybe a reminder to water the sad-looking plant in the corner. But hers? Hers became something else entirely. Quinn printed out a physical calendar. Not on a phone. Not a spreadsheet. A color-coded, laminated, taped to the fridge kind of calendar. Each week was divided into labeled squares. Blue days were for us. Orange for personal enrichment. And pink? Pink was for connection nights. That was the word she chose, connection. Not dates. Not flings. Not Berkeley time. Just connection. The first time I saw it, I genuinely thought it was a joke. I asked her if she was planning to write Yelp reviews on these men when she was done. She didn't laugh. She looked hurt. Said I was being dismissive of the journey. I wanted to shout. What journey? This isn't a retreat. It's a marriage. But instead, like always, I nodded and apologized. Because for some reason, her joy still mattered to me more than my dignity. Week 4 is when it started cracking. It began with a phone call. I had just finished a freelance deadline and was warming up leftover lasagna when I heard her in the guest room, speaking in a hushed, shaky voice. The tone wasn't seductive, it was panicked. I don't eavesdrop often, but something about the way she said, "I didn't think it would feel like this," made my skin crawl. She didn't know I was standing outside the door. I heard snippets. "He said he loved me. Wasn't supposed to get emotional. I thought I could handle this." Then silence. I backed away quietly. My heart was racing, but not for the reasons you might think. I wasn't jealous. I was terrified, because suddenly the mask was slipping. The one she wore when she said this would bring us closer, that it would be healthy, freeing, honest. There was nothing freeing about that phone call. It sounded like someone slowly realizing she had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. Later that night, I asked her if everything was okay. She said yes, smiled, said she was just talking to a friend from the plant co-op. I didn't press, but I didn't believe her either. That weekend, the calendar had a big pink square. Weekend retreat, off-grid. Just that. No details. No explanation. She packed fast. Her overnight bag was bigger than usual. She brought 2 swimsuits, hiking boots, and a book titled The Courage to Be Alone. I couldn't make that up if I tried. Before leaving, she stood in the doorway, hesitated, and asked me, "Are you okay?" It took everything in me not to blurt out, "No, Quinn, I'm absolutely not okay. I feel like a ghost in my own house, like I'm slowly being erased by your curiosity parade." Instead, I smiled. Again. "Yeah, I'm good. You have fun." I watched her drive away. I stood there long after her car disappeared, wondering who I had become. A spectator? A bystander? A doormat with a Netflix subscription? But that weekend, that was the turning point. Because on Sunday night, at exactly 1:42 a.m., I woke up to a sound I'll never forget. Her car, screeching into the driveway. The front door swinging open. Her footsteps, frantic, uneven, and not alone. And then her voice, sharp, furious, shaken. "Get out. You need to leave. Now." I sat up, heart pounding. Then I heard it. A male voice, deep and slurred. "You said this was real. You said I mattered." I stayed frozen on the couch. And then she said something I never thought I'd hear from her. "It was a mistake. All of it. I just wanted to feel something. I didn't want this." He shouted something back. I couldn't make it out, and then stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame crashed to the floor. Quinn didn't come into the living room. She stayed behind the door. And for the first time in weeks, the house was filled with something unfamiliar. Silence. But not peace. The silence of a woman unraveling. And a man finally realizing he wasn't the broken one after all. The next morning, the house smelled like citrus and silence. Quinn was already awake. She was standing in the kitchen, pouring orange juice like nothing happened. Like she hadn't just kicked a man out of our home in the middle of the night after what I can only assume was an emotional implosion. She was barefoot, hair still damp, wearing one of my old college hoodies she hadn't touched in years. I wanted to ask what happened. I wanted to demand an explanation. But my voice betrayed me. I couldn't get past the lump in my throat. Instead, I sat down across from her and reached for the cereal box like we were just 2 people playing house. Not a married couple knee-deep in a crumbling experiment called open and honest love. She finally looked up, eyes red around the edges. "He scared me," she said quietly. I set the cereal spoon down. "Scared you how?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the table like it might rearrange into the right words for her. "He got attached, obsessive, started saying things I didn't expect, things I didn't want. I told him it wasn't about feelings, but he didn't care. He said if I wasn't going to leave you, then he would fix it." There it was, the final nail in the open relationship coffin. I swallowed hard. "Did he hurt you?" She shook her head. "No, just cornered me emotionally, made me feel like I lost control." Funny, that's exactly how I'd felt for the past month. I didn't say it, though. I didn't tell her how I'd been walking on eggshells since the moment she said, "I want to explore." I didn't tell her how I watched her bloom while I withered, how every part of me screamed to run, But I stayed because love sometimes feels like obligation disguised as loyalty. That afternoon, she took down the calendar from the fridge. She didn't say a word while doing it. She just peeled the tape, folded the laminated paper in half, and slid it into the trash like it had never been part of our lives. I watched her do it. Not triumphantly, not angrily, almost gently, like burying a failed dream. For the first time in weeks, she didn't leave the house that night. She curled up next to me on the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, watching an old cooking show we used to laugh at together. I waited for her to say something, but she didn't. We just sat there, two people trying to rewind something that had already been deleted. I could have pretended that this meant things were returning to normal. But the thing about broken mirrors is that even if you glue the pieces back, the cracks remain. You can't unsee your reflection after it's been distorted. Later that night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. Not loudly, not for attention, just soft, stifled sobs behind a closed door. I almost went in, almost wrapped my arms around her and told her we'd be okay. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the part of me that was still bleeding. Maybe it was the part of me that wasn't sure I believed her anymore. Or maybe it was the realization that the version of us we used to be had quietly died somewhere between her first pink calendar square and that man's voice in our hallway. The next morning, she said she wanted to take some time off work. She needed to regroup. Said she might visit her sister in Oregon for a few days. I asked, "Alone?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I need to figure out why I did this. Why I thought I could juggle something so fragile without breaking it." And then she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "I thought you'd leave. When I suggested opening things up, I thought you'd walk away. And when you didn't, I think I resented you for staying." That one hit harder than any betrayal. She had wanted me to give up on her so she wouldn't have to be the one to do it. Instead, I held on and she pushed harder. She left the next day, packed light, kissed me on the forehead like a patient leaving a nurse, not a wife leaving a husband. And when the door closed behind her, the silence that followed was different this time. Not just absence, emptiness. But what she didn't know was that while she was gone, I finally did something I should have done weeks ago. And what I found changed everything. The first day she was gone, the house felt like a museum of someone else's life. Quinn's favorite mug, the chipped one with the faded cactus on it, sat on the counter. Her slippers were still under the couch. The air smelled faintly like eucalyptus and rose water. All these little ghosts of a woman who said she needed space. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt more useless than ever. Like an unpaid actor waiting for a scene that had already wrapped. That night I couldn't sleep. Not even the cat curled at my feet helped. My mind kept racing with thoughts I didn't want to have. Did she mean it when she said she'd gone off-grid with that guy? Was there more to the story than she let on? Was I still holding on to someone who had already let go of me? At around 2:30 a.m., I got up to grab some water and walked past her home office. The door was open a crack. Normally, I'd have kept walking. But that night, something tugged at me. A whisper in the back of my mind telling me, if you don't look now, you'll never know. Her laptop was open. Sleep mode. I tapped the spacebar. The screen flickered to life. No password. There it was, her desktop. And front and center, a folder titled Solstice. The name meant nothing to me. It wasn't work-related. It wasn't anything I'd heard her mention before. My stomach twisted. I hovered the cursor. I hesitated. And then, against every rule of trust and decency I'd ever believed in, I double-clicked. Inside the folder were photos. Dozens of them. Her and Berkeley. Her and another man I'd never seen before. Long dark hair, tattoos, wine glass in hand. His arm around her waist like they'd been together for years. Different outfits, different dates, hotel rooms, nature trails. One picture had her laughing with her eyes closed while the guy kissed her cheek. They looked happy, unreasonably happy. But that wasn't what broke me. It was the videos. There weren't many, just two. I clicked the first. It was filmed from the passenger seat of a car. Quinn was driving, singing along to a song I didn't recognize. The man beside her was recording, holding the camera low. At one point she looked over and said, "I don't think I've ever felt so free." The second video was a recorded voice note. Not for me. It had been forwarded from a contact named Marla. Quinn's voice was distant, almost dreamlike. I know it sounds bad, but it felt like he didn't even see me anymore. Like I was just wallpaper in my own life. Berkeley made me feel real. He saw me, and even though I know it's selfish, I liked who I was when I was with him. I wasn't a wife or a role or an obligation. I was Quinn. I closed the laptop and just sat there, staring at nothing. That's when it hit me. She didn't just want to explore. She didn't want to return. She had been crafting a life outside of ours for months. A parallel version of herself that smiled wider, laughed louder, and didn't have to look me in the eyes when things got complicated. She told herself I'd be fine, that I didn't feel things deeply, that I could handle it. But I wasn't fine. I was crumbling. And yet, I still loved her. That's the part no one talks about. You can know someone has hurt you. You can have proof in front of you, actual visual evidence. And you'll still ache for their voice, their smell, their hand resting on your back while you cook. Love is cruel like that. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done since she brought up the open relationship. I packed a bag. Not because I was leaving, but because I was going to find her. I needed to look her in the eye and ask, not accuse. Ask her what this was, what we were now, whether any of it still mattered. She had said she was visiting her sister in Oregon, but her sister and I had spoken before. I still had her number, so I sent a simple text. "Hey, just checking in. Did Quinn make it there safe?" The response came 10 minutes later. "Quinn? She's not here. I haven't seen her in months." I read it twice, and the air around me shifted. So where was she? Who was she with? And why did she lie? The version of her crying in the bathroom? That wasn't the full truth. She hadn't gone to find herself. She had gone to disappear. I didn't sleep after that text. My fingers hovered above the keyboard for over an hour, rereading her sister's message again and again, hoping it would change. That somehow the words would rewrite themselves into something more comforting. Something simple like, "Yep, she's here. Everything's fine." But it never came. Just silence. Which meant Quinn had lied, not once, not subtly, but deliberately. She told me she needed to heal, reflect, spend time with family. She told me this after everything. After ripping up the calendar and wiping tears from her cheeks like she was ready to come home to me. But she hadn't gone to Oregon. She had gone somewhere else entirely. And now I had a choice. Stay and wait in a house that suddenly felt more like a prop than a home, or go find out the truth with my own two eyes. I chose the second. I opened her laptop again, this time searching with purpose. I knew it was a violation, but I also knew there was no turning back from where we were now. I checked her browser history. It was mostly cleared, but she'd missed one tab, still open in the background. An Airbnb page. A cabin in the mountains, about 3 hours from our town. The listing was titled Sunset Ridge, a quiet escape for couples. My stomach sank when I saw the booking name, Quinn S. And the guest total? 2. I should have screamed, punched a wall, broken something heavy just to hear the sound. But instead, I did what I always did. I swallowed it. Then I packed a bag, wrote a pathetic little note, "Going away for a few days, won't be gone long," and started driving. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I would say when I got there. I just needed to know. I needed to see it with my own eyes, because imagining it was slowly killing me. The road twisted up into pine country. Fog clung low to the asphalt, and my GPS lost signal halfway up the ridge. I followed the directions I'd memorized and eventually found the gravel path that led to the cabin. There were no other cars, no voices, just the distant hum of wind through the trees and the faint crackle of a fire pit in the distance. The place was stunning, postcard-worthy. It had that rustic charm she always adored. The kind of place where time seemed to slow down, where you could sit on the porch and pretend the world didn't exist. I could picture her here too easily, wrapped in a blanket, laughing, holding someone else's hand. I approached the cabin, unsure what I'd do if I actually saw her through the window. But I didn't have to get that far, because as I came around the side, I saw her car parked behind the shed, and beside it another car, a matte black SUV with a broken left taillight. I knew that detail because it had been described in one of the voice notes I wasn't supposed to hear. He picked me up in his Jeep, the one with the busted light. Said he likes it that way, keeps it authentic. So he was here. Not Berkeley. Someone else. Someone deeper in her secret life than I'd realized. I froze. I could hear faint music playing from inside the cabin. Soft. Acoustic. Intimate. I stood there for what felt like forever. Every logical part of me told me to leave. Turn around. Preserve what little dignity I had left. But I knocked. 3 times. The music stopped. Silence. Then footsteps. Then the door cracked open, just a few inches. And there she was. No makeup. Hair loose. Sweater I'd never seen before. Her expression morphed from confusion to horror. Evan. She said it like I was a ghost. I didn't ask questions. I didn't accuse. I just stared at her. I think I was waiting for her to say something that would somehow make this okay. But she didn't speak. She just stepped outside and closed the door behind her. Fast. What are you doing here? She whispered, eyes darting behind her like she was afraid someone might hear. You lied, I said. You're not with your sister. She exhaled, shaking. I know. I was going to tell you. When? After the weekend was over? After the wine and the fireplace and the morning after pancakes? Her mouth tightened. She looked like she wanted to cry, or scream, or both. I didn't know how to stop, she said. It all just kept moving forward. One thing after another, and You said it was a mistake. I cut in. That night with Berkeley, the man you kicked out. You cried in the bathroom. You said you wanted to rebuild. Was that a lie too? She didn't answer, which told me everything. I took a step back. So who's in there now? Who's the one you didn't plan to tell me about this time? Her face crumpled. For the first time, I saw genuine panic in her expression. Not guilt, fear. Evan, she said slowly, please just go. You don't understand what's happening. But I did. I understood perfectly. She wasn't looking for freedom. She was running from something. Maybe from me, maybe from herself, maybe from the version of her life she built and suddenly couldn't stand to live in anymore. But this time she had dragged someone else into it. And this time I was done pretending to be the safe place she could always return to. I turned around, got in my car, and drove. No goodbye, no second thoughts. Because as the cabin disappeared in the rearview mirror, I realized something that had been buried beneath months of confusion. I had been trying to save a marriage that she'd quietly abandoned long before she ever said the words open relationship. 3 days passed before she reached out. Not a phone call, not a video message, just a short, careful text that landed on my screen like a spark in dry grass. Can we talk? I stared at it without answering. My first instinct was to delete it and pretend it never arrived. My second was to reply with something scathing and final. But instead, I did nothing. I let her words sit in the ether, unanswered, unread. The same way she had left every one of mine unspoken when she disappeared into her private paradise. That night, I checked our shared bank account, the one we'd opened during our 2nd year of marriage, back when we still believed in forever. There was a charge from a high-end wellness resort 2 towns over. Massage, facial, hydrotherapy session. Under her name, while I'd been driving home from that cabin with a throat full of glass. She was sipping cucumber water in a silk robe, letting strangers rub away the weight of choices she never had the courage to own. The next morning, she came home. I wasn't there. I'd gone to stay at my friend Julian's place. Someone I hadn't leaned on in years because, if I'm honest, I distanced myself from everyone. That's what happens when your whole world shrinks down to one person. You stop nurturing anything outside of them because you never imagine they'll leave. Until they do. Julian let me crash on his lumpy pull-out couch. He didn't ask questions. He just handed me a beer, turned on a dumb action movie, and let me exist. But Quinn, she walked into an empty house. No note this time. No bag packed. Just silence. And the slow, dawning realization that I had finally taken a step back. Around noon, she sent another text. I'm home. I want to explain. Please, Evan. I didn't answer. The next one came later that evening. I messed up. I know that. But it wasn't what you think. It got out of control. It stopped being about exploring. And I didn't know how to stop it without hurting you more. I read that one a few times. And laughed. Quietly. Bitterly. She didn't want to hurt me? That train left the station the moment she booked that mountain getaway under a fake story. The moment she looked me in the eye and handed me a version of reality she'd carefully edited to protect herself. What I didn't expect was what happened next. Julian and I were sitting in his kitchen when there was a knock at the door. It was her. Hair tied back. No makeup. Face puffy like she'd been crying for hours. She looked smaller than I remembered. Less like the Quinn who once danced barefoot in our living room and more like someone who'd been running from shadows only to realize they'd been carrying them the whole time. She didn't say anything right away. Neither did I. Then, finally, she whispered, "You left." I nodded. "Yeah. You expected me to stay?" She looked down, then back at me. "I didn't think you'd disappear without talking to me. That's not like you." And that's when it hit me. She wasn't upset that I was hurt. She was upset that I stopped being predictable. Because I'd always been the one to chase, to fix, to compromise. But now, faced with her unraveling plan, I'd done the one thing she didn't account for. I walked away. "I didn't know how to stop any of it," she said, trying to hold my gaze. It started off feeling like control, like freedom. But it turned into something else. I felt like I was living in two bodies. One that wanted the newness, and one that hated herself for craving it. Her voice cracked. "I was selfish. I know that now. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what I did. I thought I could explore and still come home to something safe." I wanted to yell, to tell her she didn't get to rewrite the damage just because she was scared now. But instead, I asked the one question I had buried beneath everything. "Did you ever really plan to come back?" She hesitated for too long. And that pause, that single, fragile second of silence, was louder than any answer she could have given. She tried to fill it. "I didn't want to lose us. I just didn't know how to be me anymore." "And what about me?" I asked. "Who was I supposed to be while you were figuring that out?" She didn't have an answer. Eventually, she turned to leave. "I'm staying at the house," she said softly. "I'll give you space. Let me know if you want to talk." But here's the twist. I wasn't sure I did. Because something had shifted quietly, powerfully. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt since before all this started. Weightless. Not healed. Not whole. But detached. And sometimes detachment is the beginning of something dangerous. Because it means you've finally stopped hoping. And when hope dies, something else wakes up in its place. Days passed, and the silence between us became its own kind of language. Not absence, not avoidance, but something colder. Muted. Mechanical. I hadn't moved back into the house, and Quinn didn't ask me to. She stayed there, alone. Surrounded by the echoes of a life she once tried to expand and ended up destroying instead. But the strange thing was, she kept trying. She texted me daily, nothing dramatic, just check-ins, little updates. "I made your favorite soup today. It didn't taste the same without you." Or Copernicus is still scratching the same corner of the couch. I finally gave up trying to stop him. Each one felt like a breadcrumb back to something familiar. But I didn't follow. Part of me was afraid if I walked back in, I'd fall back into the role I played for years. The peacekeeper, the steady one, the guy who waited by the door no matter how late she came home. And I couldn't be that person anymore. I didn't want to. Then one morning, I stopped by the house to grab a few things. She wasn't home. Her car was gone. Probably at therapy or yoga or whatever healing ritual she'd picked up this week. The house was still neat, eerily so. Every plant perfectly watered. Every throw pillow fluffed. Like she was trying to preserve something. Or pretend. I walked past her office without meaning to go in. But I stopped. Something drew me in, same as that night weeks ago. Only this time I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even angry. I just needed to see her through her own lens. I needed to understand the version of herself she never shared with me. And that's when I saw the envelope. It was wedged between the pages of a book on her desk, an old copy of The Ethical Slut, ironically enough. The envelope was unsealed. My name was scribbled on the front in her handwriting. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a letter, not dated, not addressed formally, but clearly meant for me. Evan, if you're reading this, I probably never had the courage to give it to you. I wrote it on the day I first asked about the open relationship, when I still thought this was just an idea. Back then, I told myself it would make us stronger, braver, more honest. But the truth is, it was never about us. It was about me feeling invisible. You were kind. So kind. Too kind, maybe. You never raised your voice. Never fought me. But there were days I wished you would. Days I wanted to shake you and scream, "Do you even see me anymore?" But how could I blame you for what I never said out loud? I looked outside our marriage not because I stopped loving you, but because I didn't love the version of myself inside it. I felt like I was slowly dissolving into routine, into roles, into someone I didn't recognize. And the worst part? I knew I was risking everything, and I still did it. Not because you weren't enough, but because I couldn't face the truth that maybe I wasn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you how scared I was. I'm sorry I tried to fix myself by breaking us. I thought I could do both. But now I know all I did was hurt the only person who never stopped choosing me, even when I stopped deserving it. If you never forgive me, I understand. But if you ever wonder whether I meant to hurt you, please know I didn't. I just didn't know how to stay and face myself. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But something inside me loosened. Like a knot I didn't know had formed finally started to unravel. She had never stopped loving me, but she'd stopped believing she deserved my love. And instead of asking for help, she ran. Into someone else's arms. Into someone else's bed. Into a fantasy where she didn't have to face her own guilt. And now, standing in the same house where we once built our version of forever, I realized something else. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was a story about two people who forgot how to speak the same language and tried to fix it using other people as translators. When I heard the front door creak open, I quickly slid the letter back where I found it and stepped out of the office. She hadn't seen me yet. I walked past the living room, past her, and opened the door to leave. She turned, startled. "Evan." I paused in the doorway. "I read the letter," I said without looking back. "Thank you for writing it, even if you didn't plan to show it." Her breath caught. "I didn't know if it would make anything better." "It didn't," I said, "but it made things clearer." And with that, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. But the story wasn't over yet. Because what I discovered the next day, something she hadn't written in that letter, something she hadn't dared to speak, would pull us both into a reckoning far bigger than infidelity. I didn't expect to go back. After reading her letter, after seeing just how far we'd both drifted into parallel lives, I thought I was done. I imagined our story would end with silence. Not a dramatic breakup, not shouting, but something much quieter. Two people fading from each other's orbits, carrying different wounds and memories, occasionally checking their phones but never sending a message. But life, as it turns out, has its own rhythm. A week after that final conversation at the door, something strange happened. I was walking through a farmer's market alone, just grabbing some things for Julian and me. Bread, a few vegetables, nothing big, when I passed by a booth filled with succulents. They were messy, overgrown, mismatched in chipped pots. I stopped. My chest tightened, because for a second I saw her again, not the version from the calendar or the cabin or the fake stories. I saw her, Quinn, barefoot in our backyard, humming while repotting aloe, talking to her plants like they were old friends. That version of her wasn't perfect, but it was real. I bought a small one. Didn't know why. That night I texted her. Just one sentence. "The lemon balm in the yard needs trimming. Thought you'd want to know." She replied 5 minutes later. "I can stop by tomorrow if that's okay." When she showed up, she looked nervous. No makeup, Her hair pulled back in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. She brought gardening gloves and didn't try to hug me. She just walked past, gently touched the base of the lemon balm, and smiled faintly. "You let it go wild," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do with it," I said. "It was kind of yours." We worked in silence for a while. She trimmed. I bagged the clippings. There was something peaceful in it, something honest. When we sat down on the porch afterward, sipping water, she finally said, "I've been going to therapy every day. I don't know if that changes anything, but I'm learning how to stop running." I nodded. I didn't say much, but I believed her. Over the next few weeks, we kept talking. Slowly, carefully, no rushing. She didn't ask to move back in. I didn't offer. But we started tending the garden again, not just the literal one, but the space between us. The little place where hope lives, fragile but real. And then, one evening, without a plan, without a speech, I reached for her hand. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You still see me?" she asked. I nodded. "Finally," I said. "We're not perfect, but we're trying. And trying, honestly, is sometimes more sacred than getting it all right the first time." So, to everyone watching Reddit Confessions, thank you for sticking with me through this story. Now I want to hear from you. Was there a moment in this story that hit you personally? Have you ever forgiven someone or been forgiven in a way that changed you forever? Tell us your thoughts down in the comments. I'll be reading. And if you're going through something hard, if you feel invisible, unheard, or left behind, just know, healing isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like a quiet porch, 2 hands in the dirt, and the courage to rebuild. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Reddit Confessions.